welcome all. I'm here with my good buddy, Joel Evan. First of all, Joel, thanks for making the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Okay, so there's three things I want to chat with you about, and no particular order, but three things that I think are really interesting. And I'm actually curious about your ideas on these three things, especially some of it. So let's just start with this. Let's start with kind of like your expertise, which is kind of in biohacking. You have a show about it. You wrote a book about it. You might have written a book, and then after you wrote that, you might have switched gears to other, details within biohacking, because things are always evolving. But if you could explain to me and the people who are watching, what is really the definition of biohacking? What are its benefits to kind of understand and use? And then we'll kind of get into some of what you consider are your favorite ones. So what is biohacking all about?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of people, when they talk about biohacking, they think it's like transhumanism or something. And they're like, I talked to a guy once, he's like, biohacking. I was like, oh yeah, I just went to this transhumanism. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I could care less about transhumanism. I don't know what that even means or what they're cloning humans. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the way I learned from the godfather of biohacking, Dave Asprey. He's the one who coined the term. Now, Dave, anybody that knows him, he was 300 pounds. He was overweight. He was inflamed. He had mold toxicity, all these things. And he was a computer programmer. He was a hacker. And so he was trying to get healthy. He was going to the Western doc, and the Western doc wasn't doing crap for him. They were telling him, do this, do that. He did everything. And they're like, well, you're overweight because you don't have enough willpower, Dave, and you don't know what you're doing. And he was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of you. You're fired. So he fired all of them, and he went on his own quest, and he went to all the alternative healers. And guess what? He got better. And when he started looking at his health from a higher level, he's like, you know what? It's all about systems and just the way he thinks as a computer programmer. So he took the term biology, as in bio, and mixed it with hacking. And he goes, you know what I'm doing? I'm hacking my biology by doing some of these modalities. And so now the term biohacking, in many ways, I think it's gone a little to the extreme, and it's even bastardized. And I don't even really like it anymore, because here's my thing on it. I got enchanted and really was enthralled by, because I'm like, wow, look at all these ways that we can heal the body that the Western people aren't doing. And I just love that. But I also don't like the fact that people think that they can just biohack their way to health. I'm going to tell you right now, no, you cannot. It takes mastery, and it takes a lot of learning, and it does take systems and protocols. And what I mean by that is, for example, a simple biohack could be jumping into a cold plunge and getting cold and getting frozen, right? We know the effects of that. Doing red light therapy, right? Having the red lights shine on your body. Those are all biohacks. But if you mean to tell me like, oh yeah, I have Hashimoto's or something, and I'm going to start doing cold plunge therapy because I heard that that's good for Hashimoto's, I promise you that's not going to cure your Hashimoto's, okay? Doing red light therapy is not going to cure Hashimoto's. It's going to help. But like, to think that this one hack you employ in your life is going to like be the end all be all cure all, I just don't see it. And I think people
Let
need
me ask
to.
you one thing about that. Like, what do you think is better? What do you think is better? Or maybe you'll alter. Maybe your answer will go beyond the better or worse idea. But in the meantime, what do you think is better? Someone who really is in tune with what one might call natural law, like they eat well, they exercise well, they rest well, they have a good mental, emotional uh, mindset or program or whatever one might call it, and they're healthy. Is that good, or should someone say, no, that's great, like you should do that, and then also a biohack on top of that? Or would you say that people who do their best to kind of be in tune with natural law, but they can't really accomplish that, so they fall short on some of them, so then they kind of need the biohacking to be healthier than they would have been? Or do you think the first thing, even if you're doing all that stuff, yeah, biohack anyway?
Sure. I mean, hey, if you want to be optimal, I think there's some ways you can hack and optimize your systems doing that. But what you just said, the natural laws and these rhythms, I think that's like the fundamental. And I think a lot of us, we don't want to learn about that, or we don't think, we kind of poo-poo on that, or we don't think the mind is powerful as we think. And so we look for these external things to, try to compensate for that. But I mean, here's the best example of all. I know a lot about you because I've had you on my podcast twice, and I just know a lot about, your teachings, and I've followed you for over the years. And let's face it, Pete, you healed me. So if anybody goes back and looks at my shoulder injury and what was going on there, I mean, I had a dead shoulder for like 2 years. Now, one of your mentors, Dr. Thurman Fleet, that guy, if anybody looked at him, would be like, oh my God, like, you're not an epitome of health. You smoke. I don't know how, but he was a big smoker, right?
Right.
Like,
He smoked,
was that
I think he smoked about 2 packs a day. And he actually had he had 1/5 lung capacity because he got mustard gassed as a soldier in World War I without a mask on. So 4/5 of his lungs got destroyed. And here he was with 1/5 lung capacity, I think smoking about 2 packs a day, and he lived to 88.
There you go. Okay. He didn't have a single biohack in the world, but he understood these natural laws and everything that you're talking about. And I know that you talk about in zone school. So yeah, I mean, that guy lived to 88. That's a pretty darn good life back in the, I mean, we're seeing right now the death rate in the United States, or longevity, it's like 70s, like early 70s. It's actually declined over the last couple of years. So if we're so modern in modern medicine, then why are people dying even sooner? And I think even right now, when you look at studies for the US birth rate, we have one of the lowest, still one of the highest fatality rates for birth rates in such a modern society and world. So what are we doing wrong? That's what I got to ask.
Let me ask you this on that note, or a similar note. Here's an example. I brought this up before, not so much in our conversations, but I've brought it up before in different contexts, and I want to ask you about it. So when it comes to like a so-called biohack, like here's an example. So some people like juicing. They like to take, like carrots and stuff, which I'm not saying is good or bad. I don't know. But some people, in fact, there's a guy who wrote a book back in like the 80s. I think he called himself the Juice Man. And I think he saved his own life with juicing, and obviously has helped a lot of people. And speaking of Dr. Fleet, Dr. Fleet liked juicing. So there are some people who, they might say, hey, juice for breakfast, juice for lunch, and then have like a dinner. That's an idea that may be valid or not. Then there are people. Well, let me be more specific. I read a great book, by the way. It's called There Are No Secrets. It's one of the best books I ever read. It's called There Are No Secrets by a guy named Wolf Lowenthal, who was a Tai Chi student of Ching Manching, if I pronounced that right, who was a spectacular Tai Chi master from China in New York City in the 60s and 70s. But anyway, it's a great book. I've reread it like 3 or 4 times, or maybe even more. And in the book, he says that his Tai Chi master said that juicing is bad for you. You should not juice. He said, there's just too much chi, which is a Chinese word for energy. There's just too much chi in that. So like, when God made like a carrot, he made a carrot for you, he or she, or it made, or however you want to refer to God made a carrot for you to eat. But when you take like 19 carrots and you drink it, you just basically ate 19 carrots minus the fiber, depending what kind of juicer you have. And it's not good for you. Your body's not made to have that. It's almost shocking to the body. I'm not quoting him exactly. So here you have the subject of juicing, which I'm not really calling a biohack. I guess it could be in some way, but you have the subject of juicing. Here's some very good sources, the Juice Man, Dr. Fleet, etc., who's like, yeah, juicing, it's like really good for you. Probably make you live longer and have a healthier life. And you have this Tai Chi master who was really smart. He knew what he was doing. He's like, do not juice. This is bad for you. So how does a guy like Joel, who's a smart guy, evaluate like a new so-called biohack? We'll call it juicing for the moment. And then you see these different opinions, which are completely divergent. And then Joel's like, you know what? I'm going to go with so-and-so. How do you weigh all that?
Great. That's a great question. And I remember I got into juicing way back in the day when that famous Netflix movie came out with the guy who was eating like McDonald's hamburgers for 30 days. I don't know if you remember that. I think it was something
I did not see that movie, but I remember seeing the preview for it. So I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. And so the guy was super inflamed and was eating McDonald's every day. And then he buys a juicer and loses all this weight and he's feeling great and blah, blah, blah. Right. And that's the movie. And it motivated me to go out and get a juicer. And I was like, man, maybe I need to be doing juicing. And, I fell in love with it it wasn't like that was the only thing I did. I never stopped eating. I just started adding juicing to my life. Right. So here's the thing that's cool with the example I just gave. I'm always curious and I'm always just testing and seeing like, hey, what works for me? And is there any efficacy to this? Does this seem to work? I think, I think one of the things that I always try to remember, and I can also tell you from a guy who has a lot of biohacks. Let me tell you, I have sitting down on the floor here, I have an electric stim machine. You can't see it, but it's worth $18,000. I have a pulse electromagnetic field wand over in the other room that is it actually shoots out. Some people in your audience will know Rife. I think William Rife. They talk about Rife frequencies, and it emits frequencies as well as PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field therapy. I think that's worth $7,000. Okay, so I'm only telling you this.
You should have had me get those for you. I would have got them for less.
Oh man, I gotta talk to you next time. So bottom line is, I have all of these things, and every time I've purchased a piece of equipment to hack or upgrade or optimize my life, I've always been left with, after about a week of going, I really didn't need this. And I'm always left also with this idea of, you know what? The most powerful thing I've learned of all these biohacks is, first of all, you don't need any of them. And the most powerful thing that you can actually have is your mind, and actually being able to control like your emotions and your actually what you think, what you believe, right? It's Think and Grow Rich, or thoughts become things, all these things, right? We know these are things that have been talked about from the beginning of time. So if you really understand the mind and you can manage that, that's the most powerful biohack anybody can ever have. All the other stuff is just extra, in my opinion. And I love it. And by the way, go out and optimize and do all these things. But if you're not controlling this first, you're just missing the boat.
Let me ask you this, Joel. I've mentioned this also before in other contexts, but in this conversation, I want to bring it up. So let me give you an example, and I want to get your input on this subject I'm bringing up. I remember, I think it was, let's say it was the 1980s. Bee pollen was very popular. If you went into health food stores, they often sold bee pollen. They told you, bee pollen was good for these things, which I'm not saying it's not. It may be, I don't know, but it was very popular. Now, these days, if you walk into like Whole Foods, bee pollen is like collecting dust on the bottom shelf. No one's really buying it. I'm sure someone buys it, but it's not as popular as back in the 80s. It was like right on the front shelf, like, bee pollen. Then I remember in the 90s, spirulina, if I'm pronouncing it right, it's like a blue-green algae, was very popular, supposed to fix everything.
I just had some this morning, by the way.
Yeah, and it's still around, but it was very popular in the 90s, like very popular, like right on the top of the shelves. And again, now it's probably like a little lower on the shelves. I don't know if it's collecting dust, but it's not as popular. So these things kind of come and go, so to speak. Then I remember when kombucha not came out because it's probably been around forever, but when kombucha became more drinkable in around 2001 or whatever that year was, they said it cured everything. I mean, it wasn't only a tasty drink that was supposed to be good for you. It was supposed to just cure every disease under the sun. And yes, now, as you know, people like kombucha, but it's not claimed to cure everything. And the list goes. I mean, then it was like, dark chocolate was supposed to fix it, whatever, So the thing is, there's a kind of often a new thing, there's excitement around that new thing, and then a little while later it becomes much less popular.
One of the latest ones, Dr. Pete, by the way, is sea moss. I get asked all the time on my podcast and people commenting on my post, what do you think about Irish sea moss? So I know exactly what you're talking about. That's the latest, by the way, is Irish sea moss. And by the way, that will soon be a relic, just like all these other ones that you're talking about.
And also I remember like in like I'm going to say it was like the mid 80s, tofu was very popular. Not so much popular, but people were very fascinated with tofu. Of course, tofu has been eaten in Asia for probably a couple thousand years. But when tofu became more common in like a US supermarket, people were like, oh, tofu, I don't want to eat meat, tofu, whatever. And now, people are saying like, don't eat soy. It's the worst thing you can eat. And again, I don't know if it is or not, but that's another example. And of course, it's also interesting with the carnivore diet because, there was a point also in the 80s when you go to a supermarket and everything was like fat-free. Now you never see fat-free anymore. No one's so obsessed with that. And the same with cholesterol. I remember certainly in the 1990s and up until and 70s, 80s, and 90s, people were very obsessed with cholesterol. And I remember in around 1991, I saw a book. I was in a bookstore and it was kind of like it was an MD wrote a book and he's like, all this stuff about cholesterol is wrong. It's like everything they're telling you about cholesterol is just wrong. He was in the minority then, and now it's kind of shifted, and people are not as concerned about cholesterol or in the same way they were before. So how do you, as someone who's really up on these things and this subject and biohacking and how do you look at these things? I guess we already partially know the answer with your Moss reference, but how do you look at these things when someone's like, Joel, like, stop eating tofu. Like, if you have any tofu in your house, just throw it out, or hey, I know 3 years ago I told you to be vegan, but now I'm telling you to be a carnivore. Like, how do you kind of navigate all this information that comes to you?
I think you have to test yourself, number one, right? You have to test and see what works for your bio individuality. And going back to your example with chi and the juice, right? Like, why do some people swear by it? And then like you and I have some juice, we're like, yeah, it's good. But like, I mean, I'm not like, I need all that, because you know what? Maybe our chi is more balanced. Maybe that was somebody who had that low chi. And I think everything always comes back to balance, that yin and the yang. And I think there's laws about that, natural laws. And when you look at it in health, it's the same thing. So for example, the carnivore kick is huge right now. And it's funny. I used to do a like kind of an intermittent keto kind of lifestyle for a long time. Same thing with fasting, right? Everybody was saying how fasting is the cure and da 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 da. Now we're hearing from a lot of published papers coming out saying, yeah, intermittent fasting, it works, but it's not doing what you think. You're thinking I'm getting these autophagy, which is your cells eating each other. Now, listen, that happens after 24 hours, the longer fast, 36 hours, 72. There's no doubt about that. But the intermittent fasting, where you're only eating for 8 hours a day, so you're doing like a 16-8, they're starting to say now, a lot of the experts are saying the reason people are doing well is just because they're having less calories. It has nothing to do with, oh, I'm fasting and I'm eating my cells and I'm healing from the inside. So it's just so funny. I think people need to take a step back and really test and see what works for them and their bio individuality. And I've always come back to that. The more I learn, the more I know that I know nothing. And I'm going to give you another.
Oh, sorry.
Let me give you one more example,
yeah,
because I just read this amazing book called Eat Wheat by Dr. John Douillard. He's an Ayurvedic practitioner, like very like world acclaimed world. He actually, and he's making the claim you should eat gluten, and you want to know why. These are all his whole book is about why you should be eating more sourdough bread.
I'm going to tell you something interesting about that. Seriously, this is very fascinating.
And he backs it up, Pete, by the way, with studies, just like all these other people are saying, oh, you can't eat wheat because the studies show this. And he counteracts everything. And he actually gives you a pretty good darn reason why people can't tolerate wheat. So,
yeah, and also, like again, a carnivore would avoid wheat at all costs. But it's interesting. I'll tell you something, and I've thought about this before. Certain old traditions, certain old religions have wisdom in them. Now, if someone's very religious, whatever religion they are, they would think, no, this religion has all the wisdom. But even people who are not religious would acknowledge that often religions have wisdom within them, regardless of how much you want to follow it. And I always wondered about this, which I'm going to tell you. I don't think you're familiar with it, but in Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, or very religious Jewish people who say prayers over their food, it's very interesting. If a religious Jewish person is eating a meal and they say in Hebrew the prayer before they eat certain things, and I hope I'm getting this right. If some Orthodox rabbi is watching this, maybe they'll correct me, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct.
I'll have them say
for example, if you drink some wine at a meal, there's a prayer for wine. I actually know it in Hebrew, by the way. I'm not going to bust it out now, but then there's also like a prayer for like, this or that. So depending on the various food groups you're eating, there's different Hebrew prayers that you would quickly say before you eat them. But interestingly enough, if you say the prayer over bread, which is wheat, then you're covered everything. That's in Orthodox Judaism. If you have your wine, your this, your that, your bread, but you just say the bread prayer, then you don't even have to do the rest of the prayers. It's like the way I understand it, such an all-encompassing, important prayer. So somehow in Orthodox Judaism, at least it appears to me, that they thought eating bread was like very, very, very important. Whereas, obviously a carnivore would say, don't eat bread at all costs. And,
yep.
And some people don't like gluten for whatever reason, so it's just another interesting little tidbit about that.
Yeah. And I mean, again, the more I learn, the more I know, I realize I know nothing. I've had guys on my podcast that eat they eat 600 grams to 700 grams of carbs a day, and they eat fruit and plants. And they're type 1 diabetics. So these guys and they actually have a book it's a best-selling book, and they have a huge following, and they've helped so many people, called Mastering Diabetes. So these guys actually have to take their insulin every day. So they know their insulin better than anybody on the freaking planet. I mean, these guys know their levels to the T, and their levels are perfect. How are they managing diabetes type 1, and how are they and helping all these people? Millions of people are getting help, and they're consuming 600 grams of carbs a day. Anybody in the low carb or carnivore camp is going, that's impossible. You can't do that. Phytic acid from plants, blah, 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 lectins, all this stuff. I know all the studies too. I've heard all this over the years. Okay, well, how are these guys doing it? I'm all about results, just like you are. They're doing it, and people are getting better. So I don't really care. So
What about,
again, I just think we need to go back to what works for us and try things. And I think a lot of people, they try one thing and then like, that didn't work. I tried everything and it didn't work. So I would definitely try things, and then maybe even get a coach, because I've learned sometimes a coach knows way more than I know, and you got to pay for that. And I'm happy to do it, especially if I want those good results.
Joel, let me ask you this, when it comes to we already talked about, like, there's the idea to be a vegan or vegetarian or carnivore or this or that. We've covered some of the things. One kind of group of foods that it seems like a lot of people don't like. I don't mean they don't like how it tastes, but they don't like people eating, are nightshades, which I don't know if I could rattle them all off, but I guess it's like eggplants and tomatoes and maybe some peppers or whatever.
Yep.
I could say myself, I have no problem. Like, I don't particularly like how eggplant tastes, so I don't eat a lot.
I don't eat a lot of eggplant either.
Right.
But yeah.
But if I have like tomatoes or peppers, I feel great. So like I for whatever reason, like you said, see how it is for yourself. I have no problem with nightshades. I don't try to eat a lot of them, but if I do, I feel totally fine. What is the problem with nightshades? Like, what is it? I mean, not for you. You may like them too, but
Yep.
why don't people like nightshades? What is in a nightshade that is so offensive to people?
Dark. It's night, right? It's that polarity, light and dark, and they're dark. They're nightshades. I think, the research with nightshades is purely that they have lectins in them, and these lectins are like these sticky proteins that bind, and they clog up your lymphatic system, and they poke holes in your digestive system, which then leads to leaky gut. And we know that leaky gut, when people have leaky gut, guess what? They experience all kinds of autoimmunities, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, you name it. Leaky gut is like the foundation for pretty much, it's like the foundation for a lot of quote unquote diseases or autoimmunities, right? So lectin's got a bad rap. You have Dr. Gundry, who wrote several books on the plant paradox, and he talks all about lectins. He was a heart doctor or heart surgeon who was that was his job, was like, you're having heart failure. Okay, I'm the guy who comes in and operates. And what happened for him is he had all these people coming to him, and he had a guy say, like, I don't want to have surgery. Like, my arteries are blocked and all this stuff. He goes, all right, well, let me try something with you. And so his big finding was he has healed all these people by getting them off lectins. And so now now lectins is a big deal. We talk about these plant shades and how they're ruining people. The great thing about it is it brought a lot of awareness. And so now I don't think people are aware. They're like, no, eggplants are good for you. Eat them. Tomatoes are good for you. It's a vegetable. What do we always hear? Eat more fruits and vegetables. So people are eating these things, but they have no awareness that it's actually a harm to them. So that's the good news. But again, being so dogmatic to say you don't need lectins, my naturopath, who I learned from, he has ran over 250,000 labs, and even more than that. Okay. He's looked at them, read them over, and helped people. This guy heals people too. And he gets people better all the time. And you know what he says? Lectins, I see them come up very rarely for people, and sometimes it's an issue. But for the most part, I wouldn't even avoid them. He doesn't even think twice about them. So you've got one guy saying, I get all the results, you need to avoid them at all costs. And you got another guy who's getting just as many good results and reads labs. He sees people's data. He knows exactly what's going on. And he's helped thousands and thousands of people. And he goes, not that big of a deal. So
check this out. So another aspect of healing and health, which you're familiar with, are when someone, in addition to using these biohacks and different things we're talking about, is they go to a natural practitioner. You mentioned a naturopath. So someone might go to a naturopath, someone might go to a chiropractor, someone might go to an acupuncturist, someone might go to a homeopath, someone might go to, whatever. You get the gist of what I'm saying. So let me ask you a question. Let's go into the mind of a practitioner. Now, obviously, there's many exceptions to this. What I'm going to say now, there's obviously many exceptions to this. I just want to get your opinion on this topic. And again, there's plenty of practitioners this does not apply to, but it applies to many. And I want to see if you can I want to get your interpretation of this mindset that many practitioners have. So let's just say there's someone who's a chiropractor, not me, not anyone who's in zone school, just some chiropractor. I don't even know who they are. So they think they were taught in chiropractic school, and they believe that people are sick because their bones are out of place, putting pressure on nerves. And then when they put their bones in place, the nerves will flow properly and they will heal. The patient will heal. So that's what they believe. They believe the reason people are sick is because their bones are out of place. And the reason people heal is when you get their bones in place. Many people believe that. Now, despite the evidence that's all around them, they continue to believe that. Now, again, I'm not saying that people have not gone to chiropractors and had their bones put in place and healed. That's a whole different conversation. But if you point out to that chiropractor, people go to acupuncture. Acupuncture has been around for 2,500 years. They're not x-raying anyone. They're not putting anyone's bones in place. They're not adjusting anyone. They don't care what the upper cervical position is. They're just putting needles in people and they're healing. So how can you say that the reason people are sick is because their bones are out of place, and the reason they get better is because their bones are in place? Because we have evidence all around us that that's just not true. Or you might, let's just take the acupuncturist. Let's say there's an acupuncturist who believes like the reason people are sick is because their meridians are blocked, and the way to get them healthy is put needles in the right place to open their meridians so they heal. But then you say to the acupuncturist, look, I know acupuncturists get great healing results, but what about the naturopath? They give dietary advice, they give herbs, and people heal with that. They're not getting any needles put in them. So why do you think it is, Joel, that some healers get so tunnel vision and so asleep to reality that although they probably help a few people with what they do, they don't understand the big picture? What is that problem?
It's easy. It's all ego. It's because they have been taught that, here's the thing. Let's just look at the pandemic, right? As an example. I won't mention the word because I don't want your podcast to get banned on YouTube or any of the channels, but that thing that was spreading around, right? You had, a camp of people saying, this is it, and this is it. And then later evidence was like, wait a second, this is not safe and effective. Wait a second. It doesn't actually even do anything with transmission or everything. But you still even with all the mounting evidence, you still had that camp of people saying, nope, you got to do it. You got to take it. You got to do this. You got to do that. And why? Because they have a doctor next to their name. They worked very hard to get where they are. And for them to admit that I might be wrong, that is their identity. I have to admit that I am wrong and I'm fallible. And everything I believed or have been saying up until this time and what I've learned is a complete falsity. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is complete.
Good enough for me. I knew what you meant.
Yeah, it is a complete joke. I am a sham. I have to admit that I am a sham. Oh my God, that is going to crush my ego and who I say I am. And so that's the bottom line. People are is like, this is my practice, and it becomes all about me, and they're not putting the patient first. And so even when I meet with people, I'm always looking at them in totality, and I know my capacity and I know what I know. And so if I can help them, this is where I can help them. But I always recommend, hey, you might get some benefit by going to acupuncture. In this case, you might get some benefit going to chiropractic or seeing some other healers. This is what I would do, and this is how I'd prioritize it. And that's it, man. It's ego. It's always ego.
Excellent answer. Okay, now I want to switch gears to topic 2. Switching gears totally. That was great. That was a great first part. Many don't know that Joel here used to be a police officer, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. He was a police officer in Oakland, California, and then a police officer in San Francisco, California. Am I correct so far?
100% correct. And just so you know, we're recording this August 16th, 2023. I'm very confident that I will once again be a San Francisco police officer. I don't know for how long, but I'm sure I'm going to get my job back.
Okay. We'll talk about that. Obviously, and actually you've been on the news a lot and you've been interviewed quite a bit. We can really talk about anything you want to talk about. With that said, what I want to ask you about is your opinion on crime in different cities, because I don't really understand it, and maybe you can shed some light on it. I think someone who was a police officer and maybe a police officer again has a better grip on the crime topic than most. So, for example, let's just go to some examples, and you can correct me if any of my facts are wrong, but like if you walk around a city like San Francisco for years now, for years, there's broken glass everywhere. People just like break into windows. Like now, if you're in certain states in this country, the US, if you break someone's car window and steal something and you get caught, you're going to be in some, you're going to have a serious legal problem. But in San Francisco, it appears that there's very little, if any, legal problems. So there's not much deterring someone from, hey, this is really going to happen to me anyway. So what's the big deal? I'll break this window and take what I want. And then you just see broken glass all over San Francisco. Um, and before you start answering the question, and then for example, if you look at like a Walgreens, in like San Francisco, and you see like videos of people just like looting it, they just like come in broad daylight, start taking stuff, just stealing stuff. Now, I would think that the laws in San Francisco are such that it doesn't really deter them from doing that, because if they steal a few things, whatever. Now, there are certain states in this country that if you pull that crap, you're going to have some issues. So what motivates political leaders to make laws which are so light on crime, leading to a ton of crime, it appears? Because it's funny, because you would think that people in politics, they want to get voted for. So they want to do things to make people vote for them. Well, the people who are doing the crimes, I don't even know how many of them are voting. And the
None of them.
people, the wealthy people in San Francisco who want to live in a safe place, probably it's not motivating them to vote for those candidates that are making the city into what it appears that it's become. So if you could just kind of like touch on various points in this topic, I think it would be enlightening for a lot of people.
Yeah. So quickly, my background, 6 years as an Oakland police officer, 8.5 as a San Francisco police officer. I worked Oakland. If anybody knows Oakland, California, I always say top 5 dead or alive, one of the most violent cities, always in the FBI top 5 category for violence, whether it's, violent crime, robberies, what they would call, it's a, major crimes is what they would call it. So like assault with a deadly weapon, robbery, they're always like leading. And then San Francisco, I moved over there and I worked there for 8.5 years. I dealt less with violent people and more with crazy people with mental illnesses. I mean, I never had experienced so much in Oakland. I experienced very little of that. It was just, but now, I mean, in SF, it's out of hand. So you asked a couple questions. Number one is, why is it that way in San Francisco? And you said, well, shouldn't these politicians be doing things for the good of the voters? Absolutely wrong. They're not doing that, because what I have learned since being fired 2 years ago, because I wouldn't put an experimental product in my body, which I was forced to get in San Francisco, I learned, and I just watched as things were transforming, that these so-called leaders, they're not leaders. They are just doing whatever they can to support a very vocal minority. And there's always a vocal minority. They're very hoorah, ha, 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 and they're asking for this. And because political leaders are not aligned and they have no core values, they really don't. There's all a bunch of sellouts as far as I'm concerned. They're not even leaders. Leaders do what's right, not what's easy. And these leaders, so-called leaders, like Mayor London Breed for San Francisco, for example, let's just use her as an example, okay? And let me tell you why it's so perfect, because this gives you an example of just I don't know if you'd call it corruption, but just just the inadequacies of being a leader. True leaders have core values and they live in those values. And when they're aligned with it, they understand this truth and they make decisions from this grounded truth. She does not, okay? Back 2 years ago, it was cool to defund the police. It was cool to say cops don't matter. Yeah, Black Lives Matter. And I don't care where you stand on that. I think I 100% love Black people, but I don't support the Black Lives Matter group. The group itself is, I don't think, a very friendly or good group. I don't think they're ethically doing good things. Now, she was all about that back in 2021, right? Yeah, just defund the police. Let's do this, because that was politically cool to do. So she did it. And they had a radical DA, Chesapeake district attorney, who, even if SFPD is arresting all these people for these crimes, right? Like you mentioned, auto burglaries, it doesn't matter, because the DA was not charging them. So even if it did merit a good arrest or SFPD catches them, the DA was just letting him go.
Just pause there for a second. Someone breaks into a car and or loots a Walgreens. They get arrested. The DA is like, nah, just whatever. Just a question. What is motivating the DA to say, oh, forget that? Is it they're overloaded? Is it that they don't care? They're answering to someone who's telling, like, why would the DA say, forget that?
I think in SF specifically, and some of these bigger cities, they have so many bigger crimes. And so their idea is, yeah, we're just going to kind of focus on the big ones. I think that's part of this problem, but I think and listen, I don't get too conspiracy theory, but if you look, like, he was a Soros-backed DA, I don't know what the motivation behind these guys, but you see them. There's a Pamela Price as a DA in Oakland right now. She's getting the same treat. They're ready to oust her because she's allowing murderers to, like, go for free. And so it's like, even the most liberal people are like, yeah, I have a kind heart and I don't think everybody should go to jail for marijuana, but murder, like, I think we should probably prosecute that. And so she's about to get ousted. I think they're getting ready to recall. They're starting to start a recall for her. So I think I don't know what the advantage is, and I don't know what the game plan for some of these, New World Order globalists, what their plan is by destroying cities and what they're trying to do. But I think when you have more fear and more crime, and all this builds distrust, and when you can't trust an entity, like the police, for example, if you don't feel safe, then you are more liable. You are more as a human being. They know that from a psychological view, you are more capable of saying, you know what, government, I need you. I rely on you. I need you to keep me safe. And so then the government can come in and be like, don't worry, guys, we'll save you. And they're going to institute policies that are more stripping away your freedoms and doing things. Everyone refers to the Patriot Act and 9/11. Now you got to take off your shoes and stuff, right? You can see over history, I'm just giving you one example, but if you can see some of the things that the government has done, it has led to more restrictions of your freedom if you just look at it. And so I think there's some manipulation there that they know that it can then support their overall message, whatever it is. I don't even know what it is, to be honest. I haven't thought that deeply on it. But I've just seen the rampant crime. And I'll just tell you, I've worked overtime at many of these places like Walgreens and stuff. They hire us and pay us overtime to stand there so that it doesn't happen. And people will come into the store all the time and be like, what are you doing here, officer? I'm like, oh, where are you from? And they're like, oh, I'm from Dublin, California, which is in the East Bay, or I'm from Daly City, which is just one city away from San Francisco, like just south of it. And I'm like, oh, you guys don't have cops standing at your Walgreens all day, at your Target store all day? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, that's because they don't tolerate it. And we tolerate crime. The standards are low. And so when you create these standards, you're motivating criminals to come in and do their bidding because they know nothing will happen. And I've had
when you talk about tolerating crime, and again, I know we can only hypothesize, but your hypotheses may be more educated than others. You have the south side of Chicago. You have I think it's called Central City in New Orleans. I might be wrong about the name, but it's right above the Garden District in New Orleans. It's a pretty rough neighborhood. You have parts of LA that are, in pretty bad shape. Two things. One is, do you think that the people the politicians in those cities are saying like, oh, the crime rate in Chicago is out of freaking control, we should do something about that? Or they're just like, oh, I don't care. That's number one. And number two, as a police officer, when a police officer who, let's say, works in LA, in downtown LA, where the homeless problem is out of control from what it appears to be, does your average cop who's assigned to that area, are they just like, I don't even know what I'm doing? Like, what can I, outside of seeing someone killing someone, what can I possibly do? So again, those are the two things. Do you think these cities like Chicago, New Orleans, LA, San Francisco have a plan to clean up some of the areas that need help? And part two is the cops who are assigned to those areas, like, what is their mindset?
Okay, number one, and I didn't finish the London Breed story, so you kind of brought it back with that question, which is great. So again, 2 years ago, she was saying defund the police, right? Now she realizes her job is in trouble. Like, oh my God, crime got out of hand. Didn't know this was going to happen. Whoops. So now she's backtracking. Now she's even employed laws saying, SFPD arrest people for anything, like public intoxication. Like, whoa, where have we come? Like, now we're arresting people for, we would have never done that 5 years ago. And now she's like, just get them off the streets. This is the same city that is saying, hey, go inject yourself with heroin for, in these clinics and stuff, and then walk out and go on the streets and do this stuff. We have injection clinics. We support the homeless, all this stuff. So, these people are changing what I'm getting at is these leaders, these politicians are only changing based on whatever the crowd is saying. When the wave is changing, they go with it. They're not doing for the greater good. She's just trying to keep her freaking job. She just hopes she doesn't get fired. And she knows now she needs to be tough on crime because citizens are finally complaining. Even the liberal citizens, and I've talked with many of them, and I've been on TV shows with some of them, even they are outraged, and they're like, listen, I am all for, supporting homeless, but this is out of control, right? So that's one aspect that we need to think about. The other thing is, you mentioned how do the police officers, how do they think about it? Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you're just like shrugging your hands, like, what do you want me to do? Honestly, like, what do you want me to do? Because I know what I could do, and I could be effective and get these, get homeless removed from your area or whatever. But God, that's I'm not allowed to. And like, so in SF, for example, we had to they had homeless patrols. They actually had a unit that was dedicated to dealing with the homeless. But recently the laws changed where in SF, where the Supreme Court ruled, no, you can't move homeless from, the sidewalk area because it's like a public place. And if they don't have a shelter to go to, then you're not allowed to move them. That was kind of the ruling. Oh, on that aspect too about, actually, I wanted to answer your first part question one more time because I just remember what I wanted to tell you. Why are politicians, because you kind of asked me also, why are they making these decisions? It all has to do with power and money, in my opinion. They want to keep their power and provide generational wealth to their families, right? And from on and on. Now, why would you support the homeless then? Dr. Pete, go look in Google right now. There was an article not too long ago talking about how in San Francisco, there was this homeless fund, nonprofit. Well, like $5 billion went missing. They don't know where. So let me ask you this. Do you think London Breed, do you think some of these city supervisors are getting kickbacks from these nonprofits that are extremely profitable, by the way, I can tell you? Do you think they might be getting something? I guarantee it. And that is why they're not looking out for you. They're looking out for them, and they just get pulled by lobbyists left and right. So that's what I wanted to highlight for people, and just look it up. I mean, it's there in the opening. Number two, you asked me how to police. I think most police are pretty apathetic in these big cities because they just can't do anything. And a lot of times we're just lucky, and most police officers are very good communicators and good at just building rapport and just talking to people. And so a lot of times we just talk to homeless and be like, hey man, like, I'm friendly with you. I know you're homeless. I get it. Do you mind just moving over here, or can you go down the block? And a lot of times they would. Sometimes they wouldn't. And I'd be like, all right, well, I can't do anything, so sorry. So yeah, I think they're pretty apathetic to what's going on because they know that they can't do anything and that their hands are just being tied. Recently, also, there was an ACLU activist. I saw this on Twitter. The ACLU, right, actually pays people to stand, citizens undercover. You wouldn't know. They're just standing there like for an 8-hour shift or whatever the ACLU pays them near homeless encampments. And their whole job is to watch and make sure that, like, if I show up as a police officer or even a homeless outreach group shows up, that their homeless don't get their rights violated. They actually pay someone to just make sure that they're being treated friendly. And there's a great video I just saw on Twitter of this ACLU activist sitting there, and the guy's like, what are you doing here? And then he's like, oh, I'm just here to make sure that this guy's rights. And the person's like offering them services, like nothing bad is happening. It's just crazy. And you don't know. You have no idea where your money is going to these donors. You have no idea. And that's the kind of the ridiculous things that we're seeing. And my last thing I would say to you is, I'm in Idaho right now. I go to downtown Boise, the capital. There's probably one homeless person. Why is that? How come I don't see this? How come I don't see cops at Walgreens? How come? Because their standards are different. It's all about standards. And they've let their standards go out the door.
Okay, excellent answer. It's funny, before we switch topics, when I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, at that time, New York City had a horrible crime problem when I was growing up. And I remember kind of like when you said, like, part of your answer a few minutes ago was, cops, they have a hierarchy of like what they can even deal with, even within what they're allowed to deal with. I remember when I was a kid, of course, weed was illegal. So if you're just smoking a joint on the street, that's illegal. You can't do that in New York City back then, and you could get arrested, as far as I understand it. But the crime rate was so freaking high in Brooklyn when I was a kid, and the rest of New York City. I remember people just like smoking weed, and like a cop would just walk by, like, put that out, like the guy's like, he's dealing with like severe issues. He doesn't have time to arrest this guy for smoking a joint. So
That's how it was in Oakland for me. I didn't have time for that stuff. It was just so much. Yeah.
Okay, switching gears to the third topic. We hit biohacking, we hit the police topic and related topics. And now the third topic, I just want to talk to you about martial arts because number one, as a police officer, you have to know how to like subdue people when you have to arrest. And they're going to be cooperative or not cooperative. So that's number one. Of course, you have weapons on you and stuff like that, which changes things a bit. Number two, you are a martial artist. You've trained in various martial arts. So, when it comes, listen, people do martial arts. People do martial arts for different reasons. Someone might say, look, I don't even care about practical self-defense. I just do martial arts because it's good exercise. I meet cool people and I enjoy it. I don't even care about the practical self-defense. So that's fine. They might do that. And then other people will say, I'm doing martial arts for practical self-defense. I want to know how to defend myself. And, there's some mixes of both. Some people say, oh, I think it's really fun. It gets me in great shape. And I think it's cool to have a practical self-defense. And then you have the different, just like the juicing, you have the people in martial arts, like maybe like a Krav Maga, that would say like, never go to the ground, never go to the ground, never take a fight to the ground, stay off the ground. Because if you're on the ground, that guy's friend's going to kick you in the head or whatever. And then you have like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that might say like all fights end up on the ground. So just, take your opponent to the ground and submit them or choke them or whatever you want to do with them or subdue them. And then there's, in between. And of course, I'm sure there's some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu people who say, no, you don't always want to go to the ground, whatever. And then some people might say like, hey, just become a good boxer. If you were a really good boxer, you pretty much can handle yourself on the street. And, some people say, oh, I did high school wrestling, college wrestling. I'll take anyone down, or I even play football. I'll just tackle someone, just hold them down, and be able to, control them or do whatever I want to do to them. So there's all these different, I don't want to say arguments, but different ideas about like, what's the best martial art, for practical self-defense, if that's your interest. It's funny because some people who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu look at other martial arts and they're like, you're living in a dream world, you're living in a fantasy world. And then some people who do other martial arts look at jiu-jitsu and say, you're living in a fantasy world. So for someone who's been experienced in various martial arts, been a cop for several years, where it's like, it doesn't get much more, how practical is this than that? What are your thoughts on this whole topic?
So good. So my background, I did Kaju Kembo, which is very similar to Krav Maga in the sense it's a street self-defense art. It was founded in 1947. They like to credit themselves as the first MMA because if you break down phonetically Kaju Kembo, it's Ka karate, judo and jujitsu. Ken is Kempo and Bo is Gung Fu or Chinese boxing. And so it really was a blend of various martial arts, a very hard, if anybody knows Kempo or karate, very hard,
I don't want to burst their bubble, but there's so many examples of MMA decades before that, but it's okay. We'll continue.
Hey man, like I said, everybody, it's the ego, right? You always want to be, hey, we were the first, right? So, anyways, it's a great martial art because it's very street oriented, street self-defense. So love that. Definitely helped with my confidence going into law enforcement. I was a black belt before I became a cop. So that was very helpful for me. And then I always had a fascination with jiu-jitsu because jiu-jitsu was being done in MMA, MMA. And I was like, man, these guys are just killing and they all know jiu-jitsu. I want to learn that. So when I moved to San Francisco, I started learning jiu-jitsu with Carlos Sapon, as you know, and I thought it was great. Very humbling because, and there's you're a black belt in multiple martial arts. As a black belt in Kaju Kembo, I thought, oh, I'm going to be like so good. And no, I got my butt kicked by white belts and I was a white belt. I didn't know what I was doing. And so very humbling and everything's different, right? And so I've seen also, like you just said, the duality. Like a Kaju Kembo person would laugh at a jiu-jitsu guy because they would say, and I've seen it happen where like a jiu-jitsu guy goes in to grab somebody and then a Kaju Kembo guy just brings out a pretend knife and stabs him a whole bunch of time. So every art has their place and they're all great. I think they're all great. But I was just interviewing Tony Blauer. Anybody knows him. He is 40 years martial artist, world-renowned self-defense expert. He trains tier 1 military teams till this day. And he knows his stuff about psychology, kinesiology, neurobiology. And we were talking about why people love their martial art, jiu-jitsu or whatever. And so he actually was talking about an example he gave in a training that he did with some tactical operators. And they had just gone over this training block. And this guy who had a background in jiu-jitsu starts the training. This guy comes at him. And instead of doing what Tony had showed him, like hit this guy with a spear and then I forget, like grab your pistol and come out, the guy hit him with the spear, but then quickly guillotined the guy because that was his background. And Tony's like, stop. Like, what are you doing? Like, we just said you're not doing jiu-jitsu. This is like, tactics. You can't grab a guy like we were talking about. If you grab him, now you're held up. And now you got a team of operators behind you that are held up and they can't shoot because you're in the way. So he's like, cut. Let's do it again. So they do it again. The guy does it again. Tony's getting frustrated. But what he realized, he said many years now after thinking about it, because he's done a lot of research in neuroscience, it wasn't that the guy wasn't listening to Tony Blauer. It wasn't that he was trying. And the guy was very humble. He's like, I'm trying, coach. I'm trying. So I'm sorry. It wasn't that he was being disrespectful or not trying to do the drill. It was that he had a romanticism with jiu-jitsu. There was a lot of dopamine that had built up these neural pathways that this is the correct thing to do in that situation. And so when the head produced itself in that way, guillotine, all day, because that's what he had practiced over and over. And there was this dopamine romantic relationship with it. I'm going to keep doing this again because it works, but in certain situations it doesn't, right? And so that's the whole thing. Listen, I've seen cops go through 9 months of training, in the basic police academy in San Francisco. Most of it is the base of that is jiu-jitsu. From what they're learning, because the teacher is a jiu-jitsu artist. So that's what they learn. They learn a lot of Gracie jiu-jitsu. I think jiu-jitsu is great. I think it has its time and place. I can tell you, I've had, as a trainer, I was an FTO, which stands for Field Training Officer. So I had to train new recruits coming out in the field. Unless they were like a jiu-jitsu like star prior, and they had been doing this for a long time, most of them sucked. You put them in a fight, they result back to caveman tactics, just like, hitting people over the head, because they haven't practiced it. I'm sorry, 9 months in training, that doesn't mean squat to me. You know this, you're a fighter. You put someone out on the field and then they actually feel real fear, the psychology, oh my God, like they're hit with this fear spike, adrenaline dump, and they got to fight somebody who's out of control. They don't even know where to start. They're like, you think they're going to do a twisty lock and get someone to listen to them? The reason twisty locks even work in the first place is that 99%, no, probably 97% of the people we deal with are compliant. They listen to me. Hey, Pete, turn around, put your hands behind your back. Okay, Joel. Thank God you did that. And now I'll do my little twisty lock and think that I'm so great. That ain't going to work with someone who's violent and really wants to take your life. Ain't going to happen. So you better understand, and a lot of your jiu-jitsu or whatever, if they haven't like mastered it, and I've done, and I'm sure you know this as a martial artist, even when I was doing jiu-jitsu, when I only went once or twice a week, I would never tap people. I would just maintain my level. If I went 3 times a week, all of a sudden I started tapping people more and more because I was building those layers and it was starting to create those mental blueprints. But you got to practice. And again, some cops go 9 months to an academy and they never do anything again. You think they're going to be good? Hell no. They're going to go back to caveman tactics, try to club you over the head. And that's why you see a lot of fights and a lot of cops getting their butt kicked. And people are like, I thought he was like a ninja after he got out of the academy. No, not at all. He doesn't know anything.
Okay. What about, I just want to ask one quick question about Aikido. I don't want to have a whole conversation about Aikido, but just one quick thing. Listen, Aikido, some people think it's a beautiful art. It's completely impractical. There's different branches of Aikido that have different benefits. I don't even want to get into that. However, I have heard that some police officers who are good at Aikido do use it effectively for like fingers and wrists and stuff like that. Are you familiar with that? Is that true from what you know?
Yeah, I mean, my dad did Aikido when he was a kid, so I would learn some things. And a lot of the basics, the grips and the hand locks that you're talking about, twist locks, bent wrist, those are all Aikido moves. And that was taken, I think, I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously the Jigoro Kano, but I'm trying to think who actually who made Aikido like kind of the base, who brought that into police tactics. I'm trying to remember who it was. I can't remember off the top.
Kano, I think you're talking about the founder of judo.
He's the founder of
Sensei
judo.
was the
Yeah.
founder of Aikido. I'm not sure how it made its way into police work.
Yeah, I can't remember that exactly. And again, I think everything has its place, just like with natural health. I think there's places for everyone, and for certain situations and symptoms, you use certain things. Not everything is a cure-all for everything. And it's the same thing, you know, you introduced me to this amazing, beautiful Aikido master. I mean, I don't think I could touch that guy. I mean, he's freaking amazing. So there's times and places I think where Aikido has a really valuable part in the police context and what we're doing. I just think personally, and this is just based on experience, that when you try to, most cops, because they learn in a twist lock grip, they think, oh yeah, twist lock grip, this is it. I got this guy. He ain't gonna move. I'm sorry, for my own personal experience, I'm not an Aikido master like our friend is. Maybe he could nullify this guy. I can't. And in a violent situation, people that want to fight and end your life, I just don't see twisty lock being the solution. I think you need to use blunt force trauma, or you better know how to hold a guy down and wear him out like jujitsu. We learn about, you know, getting in, controlling the person, getting to a dominant position and holding them there for a long time to call the backup.
Question, as great answer. As we're wrapping up, because those were the three topics I really wanted to cover, and we covered them well. Just kind of one other thing as we're wrapping up, a slightly different topic, but you alluded to it before, so it's kind of related to something you said before. You mentioned about coaches, like someone's like, hey, you know, they have a financial coach, or they have a life coach, or they have a health
Business coach, right?
business
Yeah.
coach, these different kind of coaches. Now, obviously, Joel, as we know, there have been some people, millions of people, who have been immensely successful in their health, in their life, in their finances, and they don't have any coach, you know. With that said, there are plenty of people who employ coaches of different types, and it's helped them quite a bit. So my question for you, when it comes to the coaching world, um, what are your thoughts on it? Like, who needs it? Who can benefit? Who doesn't need it? Who might need it? What does that interaction look like between the, you know, the coach and the client, and anything else you want to talk about on that subject? Just because you did bring it up as an interesting topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased probably, Pete, because I am a coach, life coach, health coach. So, and I've hired plenty of coaches, and I continue to hire coaches because I want to grow. Maybe that's just a belief, that because I think that that's what it means to grow and get better. But I've got also a lot of benefit. I think here's the thing. I think personally, everyone should have coaches because they pick out your blind spots in whatever area maybe you're trying to optimize. Now, the other thing, you know, to think about though, when we're thinking about coaches, I think people just need to understand this. What are you trying to accomplish, right? And how fast do you want to do it? Because there's two things that you're going to need in life. You mentioned there's people that are very successful and they don't have coaches. Well, at the end of the day, there's two things that are going to get in that person's way regardless: time and money. So if you can, you know, if you can put more time into something because you have the time, let's say right now, like I have two kids, a family, I'm working, my time is more limited now than when I was 25 and I had nothing going on. So I don't have a lot of time. So do I have a lot more money? Maybe. So I can pay to learn these skills so I can go fast, so I can move faster. You see what I mean? So I think that's what it is. Do you want to, where you have the skills that got you here aren't going to get you to the next level is my thing. So you can pay through mentorship to get that, or not, or use, do you have the time? Great. Go buy a whole bunch of books, go take courses, read, you know, do other things, learn on your own, experiment and see what works. It just might take you longer.
Excellent. All right, that was another great answer, Joel. Excellent interview. Do you have any final comments, words of wisdom, etc.?
No, I would just say this, you know, thanks for having me on. And I would just say, you know, one of the things I've been thinking a lot lately is just, you know, your health. And I think making health has been one of my number one values and priorities. And when you don't have your health, then here it is. The quote is this: when you have your health, you have as many wishes as you want. And an unhealthy person only has one wish, and that's to be healthy. And I think about the tragic loss of Steve Jobs, who had cancer at an early age and died. He had all the money in the world, but he couldn't save himself. So I just would really strongly urge people to invest in their health. And as a dad who has 2 kids, like, man, I think about that even more as I just turned 41. Like, man, I would never want to be the burden for my family because I didn't take care of myself and I was inflamed and overweight. And I see all these men right now with low T, and I'm just thinking, yeah, you got here for a reason because you're not taking care of yourself. So the last thing, I'll just plug my book, Ignite. It went bestseller in 7 different categories. And it really I talk about weight loss, but I also really just talk about unlocking your human potential. A lot of the book is about mindset. And I think that is the key.
How does one get that book? Just go to Amazon and then search that book's name.
Amazon. Yeah. Ignite, Joel Evan, Ignite. And
hold it up.
you can find the book.
Okay.
Yep.
So if anyone, if someone goes to Amazon and they in the search put in Ignite Joel Evan, it'll come up for the link. Okay, good.
You got it.
I'll just add one thing to what you said about the health. This is my own little 2 cents on that. I think what happens is sometimes people get into a groove for what they consider to be healthy. And I'm not saying it's not, because sometimes those grooves are very good. Like maybe they get up and they jog 6 days a week, which is great. And sometimes they wake up and they're like not in the mood to get up, but they just say, hey, I'm going to get up anyway and jog. And there's something to that. I'm not saying there's not. But the only danger is, in my opinion, I mean, maybe danger is too dramatic a word, but sometimes people are so in that mindset of robotically just doing what they're doing. Sometimes it's actually good to take a day off. Now, I'm not saying when people should take day offs. They can take day offs if they want or not, or they can maybe work out 6 days a week and rest one day or whatever. I think it was David Goggins says he works out 365 days a year. Okay, that works for him. So I'm not saying how much people should work out or how much they should rest. But regardless of what groove you're in, if you wake up one day and you're like, I should just rest today, then you should probably rest that day.
Agreed.
It's probably better for you. And then the next day have a great workout or whatever. So that's my one little addition to that. I don't know if you have any comments on that, but
no, I love what you said, man. I'm all about balance too. And I think David Goggins is awesome. He's an inspiration. He shows us what you can do when you ignore the weak part of your mind saying, I think you should quit. It's just take it easy. He's proven that you're more powerful than your mind ever can be. But I will also say on the flip side of that is maybe he has too much chi, Dr. Pete, because that's a guy who also has had like 4 ACL surgeries, 10 heart surgeries. The guy's like in his like early 40s.
Well, the thing with David Goggins, and I don't know him personally. I got nothing bad to say about him whatsoever. I know he motivates a lot of people, and I actually like him. I like watching him.
Same.
If you listen carefully to what he says, he is motivated by a lot of revenge, which is not healthy. For example,
you got that right.
For example, like he will say often, this person and these people and this group said I would never make it, and look at me now, and he's motivated by revenge.
Yep.
I'm not saying his whole life is, but to a large part of what he talks about is motivated by revenge, and that is not healthy. So despite the fact that he's doing a lot of physically healthy things, and he might have some healthy mindsets too, I don't know, but at least part of his mindset is not the wisest, in my opinion. And again, like I said, I got nothing against him. He seems actually like a cool guy. I probably would like him if I met him. And no one's perfect. But that's one thing I would point out.
So true. And I think the David Goggins, I've been thinking about him recently too. It'll be really an experiment, right? Because we all look for inspiration from someone like him, and he gives us like, yeah, I can go harder. I can try harder. But the thing about Goggins that I worry for him is like, he might be one of those guys who's like 60 and is dead because he's just done so much, and he's actually gone so much to the other end of the spectrum that he's just killing his heart. And we won't know until it happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think also like what I've found is, we can learn lessons from people, even if in general, they're not our type of, the kind of person we want to hang out with or that we admire overall. But, listen, I don't think anyone should be taking lessons from Adolf Hitler. But with that said, there are people who, have some points which are worth considering and maybe learning from, even if you don't like a lot of the things about them in general. And I'll give you an example. I know I said we're wrapping up, but I guess
No,
we have
sorry,
have
Pete.
all these like epilogues here. But there's a, you know, anyone can go to YouTube and watch it. It's an interview. It's really a debate between Jordan Belfort and Grant Cardone. Basically, Jordan Belfort has a podcast. He had Grant Cardone in studio, and they really just disliked each other. I mean, it was like just
Wow.
this
I want to watch this now.
totally contentious hour and a half of just, you know, egos upon egos fighting, and just the most unfriendly interview you've pretty much ever, you know, that I ever saw. Now, on top of that, I am not a fan of either of theirs. I find them both quite unpleasant. I There's so many things that I find so unlikable about both of them. However, they both have made millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, which I'm not saying anything about either. Like that, everyone can view that how they want. But they both do have, although they disagree on business ideas, they both do have some worthwhile business ideas. Not all of their ideas on business are worthwhile, in my opinion, but some of their ideas on business are worthwhile. So I've actually watched that interview about 6 times, because I've picked out um, interesting ideas about business success from both of them. And, you know, I probably disregarded 90% of what they both said also, but there's some gems in there. So that's just an example. And I go, listen,
Yep.
I have nothing against either of them. I wish them both the best. I don't know them personally. But anyway, so that's if you want to check that out, you probably just, if you just search like Jordan Belfort, who of course was the Wolf of Wall Street, Grant Cardone interview. It's high, if nothing else, it is incredibly entertaining.
I can't wait. I'm gonna listen to that while I work out today.
Yeah, cool. All right, Joel, thanks a million, buddy.
Thanks,
I
brother.
really appreciate it. Thank you.